Everyone at the office laughed when 80-year-old Margaret asked her grandson to help her send emails. They saw her thick glasses, slow typing, and constant questions about the Google as proof that old people just couldn't handle technology. What they didn't know was that Margaret had helped design the internet security protocols they used every day. And today, that forgotten expertise would save their entire company. Margaret Chen had been the receptionist at Digital Solutions Inc. for 3 years. At 80 years old, she was everyone's favorite office grandmother, always bringing homemade cookies, remembering birthdays, and asking sweetly for help with computer things. "Mrs. Chen, you clicked the wrong button again," said David Torres, the 28-year-old IT specialist, walking over to her desk with barely concealed impatience. "I showed you how to open your email yesterday." Margaret looked up through her thick glasses with an apologetic smile. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry, David. These computers are just so confusing for someone my age." David sighed and clicked a few buttons, fixing her screen. Behind him, other young employees exchanged knowing looks and suppressed smiles. "Maybe it's time to consider retirement, Mrs. Chen," whispered Jessica from accounting. "Technology is moving so fast these days." What none of them knew was that before Margaret Chen became their sweet, helpless receptionist, she had been Dr. Margaret Chen, Ph.D. in computer science from it. For 30 years, she had worked for the Department of Defense, developing cybersecurity systems that protected government networks worldwide. She had retired quietly at 65, wanting to enjoy her golden years without the stress of high-level security clearances and classified projects. But when her savings ran low and her husband passed away, she needed a simple job to make ends meet. The receptionist position was perfect, easy work, friendly people, and nobody expected much from an elderly woman. She could just be grandma. Margaret, who needed help with emails, it was 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Margaret was slowly typing a memo when every computer screen in the building suddenly went black. Then, one by one, they flickered back to life, displaying the same terrifying message: "Your network has been encrypted. All files are locked. Pay $2 million in Bitcoin within 48 hours or lose everything forever." Panic erupted throughout the office. "What's happening?" shouted Rebecca Walsh, the CEO, rushing out of her office. David Torres was frantically typing at his workstation. "It's a ransomware attack. They've encrypted everything: files, databases, backup systems. Everything's locked. Can you fix it?" Rebecca demanded. I don't know," David admitted, sweat forming on his forehead. "This is way beyond anything I've seen before. The encryption is military grade." Within an hour, the office was filled with FBI cybercrime agents and expensive security consultants. Everyone was talking at once, analyzing code, making urgent phone calls. Margaret sat quietly at her reception desk, watching the chaos unfold. She recognized the attack pattern immediately. Agent Sarah Mitchell from the FBI approached Rebecca. "Ma'am, this is one of the most sophisticated attacks we've ever seen. The hackers are using a technique called Phantom Protocol. It's virtually unbreakable." Margaret's head snapped up. Phantom Protocol. She hadn't heard that name in 15 years. "The only person who might be able to crack this is the original designer of these defense systems," Agent Mitchell continued. "But Dr. Margaret Chen retired years ago and hasn't been seen in the cybersecurity world since." Margaret stood up slowly from her desk. The entire room fell silent as all eyes turned to the elderly receptionist. "Excuse me," Margaret said quietly, her voice carrying a new authority that no one had heard before. "Did you say Phantom Protocol?" Agent Mitchell looked confused. "Yes, ma'am." "Are you familiar with cybersecurity terminology?" Margaret removed her thick glasses, the reading glasses she didn't actually need, and looked directly at the FBI agent. "Agent Mitchell, I designed Phantom Protocol in 2009, and I know exactly how to stop it." The room erupted in confused murmurs. David Torres laughed nervously. "Mrs. Chen, I think you're confused. This is very serious technical stuff that, David," Margaret interrupted firmly. Please access Terminal 7 and run a trace diagnostic on the encryption signature. Her voice had completely changed. Gone was the sweet, confused grandmother. In her place stood someone with decades of authority and expertise. I what? David stammered, Terminal 7, diagnostic trace. Now, something in Margaret's tone made David comply. His fingers flew across the keyboard, following her instructions. The signature shows a 256-bit encryption key with a recursive algorithm. David read from his screen, his voice growing quieter with confusion. Correct. Now check the timestamp on the original intrusion packet. David typed rapidly. 9 hours 47 minutes and 23 seconds a.m. Margaret nodded. The attack began exactly 17 seconds after I opened my email this morning. This isn't random. They've been watching our network, waiting for a specific trigger. Agent Mitchell stepped forward. Ma'am, how could you possibly know all this? Margaret walked to David's workstation and gently moved him aside. Her fingers, which had seemed so clumsy on the keyboard for 3 years, now moved with practiced precision. Because, she said, typing rapidly, I didn't just design Phantom Protocol. I also designed its countermeasures. Code flew across the screen as Margaret's hands moved faster than anyone in the room could follow. She was accessing system layers that most of the IT consultants didn't even know existed. This attack isn't about money, Margaret continued as she worked. The hackers are using our company as a test ground for something bigger. They're preparing to attack government systems. Within minutes, Margaret had isolated the malicious code and begun the decryption process. How is this possible? Whispered one of the expensive security consultants. Margaret paused in her typing and looked around the room at all the shocked faces. My name is Dr. Margaret Chin. For 30 years, I was the lead cybersecurity architect for the Department of Defense. I hold 17 patents in network security and help design the protocols that protect everything from banking systems to military communications. David Torres sank into a chair. But but you couldn't even send an email. Margaret smiled. Gently, David, I was sending emails before you were born. I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to be the sweet grandmother who brought cookies and didn't intimidate anyone with talk of algorithms and encryption keys. She turned back to the computer. But sometimes we can't hide who we really are. With a final keystroke, every computer screen in the building flickered back to normal. Files reappeared, systems came online, and the ransom message vanished. The room erupted in applause, but Margaret was already tracing the attack's origin. Agent Mitchell, she said without looking up from the screen. The hackers are operating from 3 locations, Moscow, Beijing, and surprisingly, a server farm in Nevada. I'm sending you their exact coordinates now. Agent Mitchell stared at her phone as the information arrived. Dr. Chen, would you consider consulting for the Bureau? We have several cases that could use your expertise. Margaret saved her work and stood up, putting her reading glasses back on. I'm very flattered, Agent Mitchell. But I have a job already. She looked around at her stunned co-workers. That is, if my employer still wants me. Rebecca Walsh stepped forward. Dr. Chen, Margaret, I had no idea. Would you consider moving to our cybersecurity department? We could really use someone with your experience. Margaret smiled. That's very kind, Rebecca, but I actually like being the receptionist. I enjoy greeting people, answering phones, and bringing cookies. It makes me happy. She paused and looked directly at David Torres, who was still staring at her in amazement. But perhaps, she continued, we could arrange for me to help with any technical difficulties that might arise. And David, next time I ask you to show me something on the computer, maybe listen a little more carefully. You might learn something. 3 months later, Margaret Chen was still the receptionist at Digital Solutions Inc. She still brought cookies to work and still asked for help with computer things. Though now everyone knew she was just being polite, the company had upgraded. their security systems based on her recommendations, and she quietly consulted on their most sensitive projects. David Torres had become her eager student, finally understanding that asking questions wasn't a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. And whenever new employees started at the company, someone would always warn them, "Be nice to Mrs. Chen. She's not just the receptionist. She's the most dangerous person in the building." Margaret would just smile and offer them a homemade cookie. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who choose to appear powerless. And sometimes the person you underestimate most is exactly the person you need when everything goes wrong.